Hello everybody and welcome back to the Film Freaks Podcast, the latest form of cinephile entertainment hosted by yours truly, Tyler from CaliCriticReviews, as me and another movie buff guest discuss the latest week in movies. And yes, if you're hearing this very clear, I am using this on GarageBand, not that crappy Audacity sound that I had to use before. We're finally rebounding in sound quality here on Film Freaks, but now moving on to what we're going to cover. And joining me today for this episode is one of the best YouTube movie reviewers there are, one who has very precise diction and dissection when it comes to discussing any film that he reviews. That is Mr. kacman11.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the really kind introduction, Tyler.
You're very welcome, sir. And here on the Film Freaks Podcast, we break down the latest week in movies, as I said, and specifically that's the news, the trailers, the latest releases as the main things. And first we're going to jump into our first topic, which is the Hollywood 3, where we discuss 3 of the biggest Hollywood news stories to release. And the first one up is Steven Soderbergh, who recently made the Channing Tatum starring Magic Mike. He has reportedly said that he's going to retire from filmmaking, and it's actually not full retirement, but a semi-retirement more of, after he releases The Bitter Pill and the Liberace biopic for HBO next year. And he's reportedly going to jump into television. Nobody knows what kind of project specifically he's going to take on, but no matter what, this is a very intriguing announcement. So what'd you make of this?
I think it kind of makes sense, because Steven Soderbergh, his movies are primarily ensemble pieces. You get the Ocean's films, you have last year's Contagion, you even have this year's Magic Mike. And it kind of makes sense. I didn't really predict it, but it does make sense in the end that he would move on to television, because it kind of seems up his alley. He likes dealing with a lot of characters, if maybe sometimes not for character development, which may be one thing I'm worried about with his potential TV shows, because I don't think character development is one of his expertises. But, I mean, the thing with Soderbergh, though, is that just because he's behind a show, potentially, doesn't mean I'll go rush to see it. I mean, I watched The Walking Dead regardless of Frank Darabont's show running the pilot, and I'm avoiding the newsroom right now, and it's not because of Aaron Sorkin writing it. I think what's more important is that if it's a good concept, viewers, I think, will be there, but in the end, it makes sense for me that I think Soderbergh would be moving to television.
Yeah, whoever really knows, I don't think it would be any territory within creating his own projects, but more of just directing them like he does for movies, in which he'll just make the transition from one industry to another. But from the way it sounds especially, what I'm really intrigued about the most is the fact that nearly every movie that he's made is dealt with ensemble casts, and that's really where his movies excel the most. And if he can find a project specifically that he can stick with for either the short or long term, I feel like that kind of field in television shows of today is really good, what's going to be right up his alley.
I think, though, what Soderbergh needs to do, though, is that I don't think a short-term gig for a show could really work for him, because Soderbergh has a very distinct visual style. He uses color saturation. His shots are framed in very hyper-specific ways. I think if he was to go onto TV, he would have to be in it for the long run. Otherwise, if another director came into his spot, the difference would be polarizing.
Yes, and that could be one of the few flaws that he could have within this transition, but nonetheless, it's a very intriguing announcement, to say the least. I'm really looking forward to what he could be cooking up for his future television career, because I am a fan of the films that I've seen of his. Granted, I'm going to get killed for saying this, but I have not seen the Ocean movies yet. But otherwise, this is going to be very interesting as it shapes up for the future, because technically, the Liberace biopic that he's making for HBO could technically be his introduction into that foray. So, nonetheless, this is going to be pretty cool. And moving on to our second news story, which also somewhat involves Steven Soderbergh. This involves his latest movie, Magic Mike, which we're going to be reviewing later when the Rate the Release segment comes into play. And reportedly, Magic Mike is in early developments of being made into a future Broadway musical. So, what do you think of this?
Why not? Yeah, I mean, like, if a movie like Monty Python and the Holy Grail somehow became a musical, Magic Mike can easily become one, because this already has the dance numbers easily implemented into it. The movie itself has a very clear 3-act structure, and I think it'll work, especially if it's on Broadway. A lot of kind of middle-aged women are going to probably flock to this, because it's going to be a classy way of going to a strip club, which I think will work out great money-wise for the show, if it ever does happen. And if it ever does happen, I mean, I don't think it should have any issues in controversy-wise, because you have shows like The Book of Mormon and Avenue Q that have been sweeping the Tonys, and they deal with incredibly racy topics. A couple guys taking off their clothes on stage to some good music is probably not going to be an issue. So even though this is kind of a rumor, I'm not sure, it seems like it'll probably be a very likely reality.
Yeah, I can agree with that too, especially because even within the dance sequences, which there really aren't too many as I thought there would be in the feature film alone, those are pretty much already set for the film. For the musical itself. So pretty much that gives them less things to actually work on leading up to the actual production if it does happen. And in addition, they set up the human drama in the film itself very well enough to the fact that this musical is basically already completely structured on its own. It's just interesting for how that they would tie in the musical aspect to the adaptation itself, though.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, that's that. Magic Mike is potentially being turned into a Broadway musical, so that's happening. And now moving on to our last news story in the Hollywood 3, which is quite an interesting one to say the least, because it involves one of the best cultly acclaimed film directors alive today, and that is Mr. Edgar Wright, in which, in the midst of setting up to shoot The World's End, which is the finale to the Blight and Ice Cream trilogy, otherwise known as the Cornetto trilogy, which is, without a doubt, one of the most entertaining film franchises there are, and it's going to be great to see them get together for one last time in the end. But in the midst of all of this work that he has been doing with, he's reportedly wrapped up a test reel for the Ant-Man adaptation, which is supposed to release sometime in either 2014, 2015, who knows, but he's been working on it for a long time. And Kevin, I know that you are a huge fan of Edgar Wright, so I know that you were excited for this.
Oh, absolutely. I think Edgar Wright, as a filmmaker, has one of the absolutely most perfect filmographies of any director of all time. He has Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. They're all three very technically brilliant, very humorous, all around, completely A-plus packages. And I'm always excited whenever he announces another project, which isn't too often. But this year, he's getting a lot of stuff. And Ant-Man, this huge, potentially huge summer blockbuster superhero film from Marvel, it seems too good to be true almost. I'm really happy about this news, and I'm really excited for Ant-Man. And I'm not skeptical at all about it, because Edgar Wright has delivered every single time, and I can't see him not delivering with possibly his biggest opportunity yet.
Yes, and for me and Edgar Wright's work, I certainly have never been disappointed with anything that he's done. Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the immaculately entertaining TV series Space, which if you have not watched that yet, go to Netflix instant and add that to your queue immediately. Let alone, don't even just add it, watch it immediately. It's such a great show. But,
so good.
Yes. And nonetheless, as you are... I am really excited for this, and I already figured out one thing that I'll be looking through at Comic-Con this year to try and get my hands on a few Ant-Man comics so I can be accustomed to the character, because I know that with Edgar Wright working on this film, of course, I know that it's going to be very entertaining in so many different ways, and it's going to be even better for the fact that Joe Cornish co-wrote the script with him, who Kevin is also a huge fan of because he wrote and directed Attack the Block.
Yes, my favorite film of last year. You can never go wrong with that man.
Yes, you can't. Yes, Edgar Wright has wrapped up his test reel. It's going to be interesting for when first footage will finally be released, because technically the film has not started official shooting yet alone it hasn't even casted its Ant-Man yet. But that's happening out there, so start reeling up your anticipation level for that. And now we move on to our next segment, which is Trailer Talk, where we're going to discuss the latest trailers to have released in the past week. And the first one is quite a key one, because it's one of those instances where the teaser trailer itself was better than this one that was released before. that actually, excuse me, was released in the last week or so. And that is the new trailer for Looper, the sci-fi film starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Bruce Willis, and Emily Blunt. It's written and directed by Rian Johnson, who directed the incredible debut indie film Brick, and he also did the caper comedy The Brothers Bloom. He's really adapting to working within different genres with each movie that he's making in his short but very talented career. So what do you think of the latest trailer to this film?
Well, before I go into it, I just want to assure everyone that I'm really looking forward to Looper. I'm all for an original sci-fi film, a good sci-fi story, and this film seems to be delivering it. That being said, I'm not the biggest fan of this new trailer. I like the teaser a lot better, only because the teaser, I think, it's better at capturing the premise of the film. It explains it a lot better than this one, but it also keeps the whole movie 5 times more mysterious than this trailer does. My problem with this trailer is that it shows a lot of really, really weird, interesting visuals, and I'm kind of afraid that they gave away like 75% of their money shots here. But that being said, it's really good visuals, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the story implements them, because it seems like it's a simple enough plot. I want to see how these come to play. But I'm all for it. I haven't seen Brick. I've seen The Brothers Bloom, and I'm a big fan of Rian Johnson's appearances on the Slash Filmcast, especially when he interrupted the whole thing because his Angry Birds game the volume was up and it started interrupting everyone's reviews. That was hysterical. That's probably my favorite Rian Johnson moment. Hopefully Looper is going to trump that moment and be my favorite Rian Johnson moment.
And hopefully Brick will trump that moment before you end up seeing Looper.
Oh, that's right. I have to see Brick.
Yes, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. I know several other people that have in their favorite movies of all time lists. It is without a doubt one of the best movies for the 2000 to 2009 decade for sure. Now, for my opinion on this trailer, I'm about right with you on it. I think that it delivers a lot of visually hypnotic images that are very interesting, but as you said, it does have that flaw in it. Well, not even a already given flaw, but a potential one in which they already gave away the best money shots that you'd end up seeing in the final cut of the film. But I am still really looking forward to this movie. I just feel this trailer itself, it expanded the universe that's setting too much to a point where the element of surprise was taken out a bit, which is not a good thing going into a movie most of the time. But given that this is Rian Johnson and it has a very good cast behind it, I'm really looking forward to the movie without a doubt. I still prefer the teaser trailer above it, but that's not preventing me from not having any doubts going into this movie. I still have a lot of hope for it, and it could potentially be yet another score in Rian Johnson's now 3-film filmography, which is a slim amount of films that he has made in his career, but all of them are all exquisite in their own way and very well made too. He's definitely one of the best filmmakers alive today. So yes, the new trailer for Looper is out there, but if you do really like the teaser, I recommend that you pass on watching this if you want to be more surprised than anything else. And now we move on to our next trailer, which this is yet another new trailer for an upcoming movie coming out later this year. In fact, not even that far. It's already released in almost a full month, for a matter of fact. And that is the new trailer to the Total Recall reboot starring Colin Farrell, Kate Beckinsale, Jessica Biel, and Bryan Cranston. What did you think of this?
Really not a fan of this trailer and not a fan of just this movie already. Because I feel that Total Recall is a film that didn't need a remake. You can watch that movie today and it would still be like technically and culturally relevant. It's a really fun movie. Arnold Schwarzenegger's one of Arnold Schwarzenegger's best, and like mainstream wise, one of his most underappreciated. It's a lot of fun, and that's what this movie looks like. It's lacking. It doesn't look fun. It looks like it's uber serious. I think this trailer does a really bad job explaining this movie's really cool premise, and I just highly recommend watching the original first before going into this. So if you watch the remake first, hopefully, I don't want to make any prejudgments, but just watch the original, please, and then see how this trailer and how this movie is already getting parts of the movie just wrong, like the whole attitude. And I'm all for remakes. Remakes are always interesting to see how it'll change the original idea, put it on its ear. But this one just kind of seems like it's missing the mark completely already. I'm going to go into this with a simple viewpoint, only because Total Recall is like a really special movie to me. It was the first movie I ever reviewed on my channel. And I'm not looking forward to Total Recall too much. Not a fan of this trailer. It looks like a lot of cliches, a lot of stuff we've seen before. Regardless of how good the two leads are, we have Colin Farrell as the lead hero, and we have Bryan Cranston as a villain.
Heisenberg.
Oh, gotta love Bryan Cranston.
Who doesn't? But me, on the other hand, my viewpoint on this trailer is a bit more in a minority side, for a matter of fact, because I have not seen the original Total Recall with Arnie yet, and I haven't even read the short story by Philip K. Dick either. However, I'm going to try to do that before this movie release. Now, the trailer itself, the first one that released a couple months ago, and I was not the biggest fan of it because there were some visuals that looked decent, yet the problem with it is that it just had very poor editing within cutting all the footage together, and it released way too many money shots. And I feel like that's the same thing with this one, in which it's just really even worse at some points. Because as much as I like the actors behind it, specifically Colin Farrell and Bryan Cranston, they're two of some of the best actors working today. The problem with this trailer, though, is that it just doesn't look like it really needs to be made, for that matter. And when it got to some of the sequences for where Quaid, Colin Farrell's character, goes on the run and he's in this futuristic car, I was just getting way too much of a Fifth Element vibe from it, because the visuals itself were eerily similar to the way that they portrayed the future in that film. And I'm a huge fan of the film The Fifth Element, and if you're already starting to rip off the visual style of a film like that, you already have several flaws going into the movie, and I haven't even seen it yet. However, the only hope that I have really lined into it is the fact that last year, in the first week of August, we had a huge surprise release in theaters, which was Rise of the Planet of the Apes. And this movie is filling in its same slot, even though it's not the same specific day, it's the same weekend for that matter. So that is some hope that I do have there. Maybe we could have the same moment of last year transcend to this year, of where a movie that not many people were looking forward to turns out to be an actual surprise. So I'm still giving my hopes at a certain level, yet I'm going to go in very open-minded, to say the least, because these trailers just simply haven't done enough. But yes, the new trailer for the Total Recall reboot is out. Check it out if you want. However, if you are a fan of the original and just feel that this is totally unneeded, why don't you watch the total ripoff video that someone put on YouTube, in which they put both the trailers from the original and the reboot together to show how they're literally the same movie and nothing new. Have you seen that, actually?
No, I haven't. But I do want to go on one point you mentioned about this being released on the same weekend as Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I think what Planet of the Apes had that this movie doesn't is a really weird pull. Because Rise of the Planet of the Apes, that attracted its audience because its big marketing thing was, hey guys, come watch these monkeys take over a city. That was the entire marketing campaign for months, weeks. This movie doesn't really have that pull. It kind of has people in flying cars, and we've kind of seen that a lot before. There's no really real creative pull this movie has, which I think will hurt it in the long run.
Yeah, that's my key flaw going into it as well, in which, as much as I do want this to be a surprise, there's just too many flaws that I'm already noticing in the trailers alone that are preventing me from doing that. But yes, the Total Recall trailer is out, for the fact the new one, for that matter. And now we move on to our next trailer, which this is a movie that I have really been anticipating for a while. And it's from the RZA, who is a member of the famous Wu-Tang Clan, which is one of the most recognized rap groups out there in music industry today, and have been for years to come, actually. And this is his debut film. He has done a lot of acting gigs for the past couple of years in movies like Funny People and Due Date, which he has been decent in those. He showed me that he can at least act. In this movie, though, The Man with the Iron Fist, he's co-writing, directing, and starring in one of the lead roles, in which this movie is set in feudal China, and it's set between all of these warring nations, and it's essentially one big kung fu movie, but very hyper-violent at the same time. I was really looking forward to this trailer, and I'm going to turn things over to Kevin. What'd you think of this?
Well, kung fu movies have always been a really thing for the Wu-Tang Clan. They like to sample clips from samurai and kung fu films. A lot of their albums are almost completely centered on kung fu films. Take Just a Liquid Swords, which is completely centered around this weird movie called Shogun Assassin, which is actually an awesome movie. So Wu-Tang Clan has great movie taste. Who would have thought? But I'm really glad that RZA this is his passion project. This is very much something, it feels like something that he's always wanted to do. And I'm just hoping that this is just a really bad trailer for a potentially amazing movie. I'm not really feeling the trailer, only because I think it's a really poorly cut together trailer.
Yeah, I could see those points right there, because that was actually a similar problem that I had in the numerous rewatches that I had of it, because I really enjoyed the trailer the first time I saw it, but then that's because I had been looking forward to this for a long time, ever since I first knew about the project. The amount of times that I have rewatched it since, though, I'm starting to express a little bit of doubt in it, despite the fact that the action sequences, they look incredible for that matter. But the main goal that this movie's going for in the direction in terms of plot, I just don't really get it so far. I mean, okay, you have these warring nations in feudal China, but you don't really know what side these people are fighting for. They don't really set those alone in the trailer, which, granted, I'm not asking for too much of that, but you can at least set up a few seconds to show that these people are on this side, and the conflict stemmed from this. And the editing is just all over the place to really show you what the main setting of this movie is for the direction it's going to go in for the story that it has. But nonetheless, the fact that this is the RZA's debut in the feature-length filmmaking, I'm going to see it no matter what, because the action sequences do look very over-the-top, hyper-violent, and very Kill Bill, Quentin Tarantino-inspired, especially in one image from the trailer that you see where there's blood just gushing everywhere. But no matter what, I'm really looking forward to this movie. I'm just hoping that there's a better trailer to follow this one up in order to get me more excited than I already am. But no matter what, this is definitely one of my most anticipated movies for the rest of the year, though, once summer passes by.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to this as well, and it has the Tarantino seal of approval. He's presenting the film, so I have faith in Tarantino, and I'm really hoping this was just a badly cut trailer.
Yes, as mostly what I was perceiving of it as well. But now we move on to our final trailer, which is one that I was sort of looking forward to because this filmmaker hasn't made anything big in the past couple of years, and it was reportedly going to be a return back to his original form from the movies that he made during the 80s specifically, and that is the trailer to Spike Lee's Red Hook Summer. I'm going to start off with my thoughts on this one first because I was sort of looking forward to it a little bit despite the very divisive reaction it generated when it first premiered at Sundance, I believe, and It was supposed to be a return back to the location of where he set a lot of his movies, which is Brooklyn, New York. And this is specifically set in the Red Hook neighborhood of Brooklyn. And it centers on this kid who moves in with his preacher uncle, and it's really just set during the summer in the Red Hook neighborhood of this kid trying to adapt to his new surroundings. But I just did not like this trailer at all. It is so overly preachy. It just has this religion aspect with the fact that the uncle's a preacher, and they're just slamming the subject of religion down your throat so much. Like, I don't mind religion in movies as long as it just doesn't become overzealous and forced and preachy at times. That's where I'll draw the line then, is if they're overdoing it. And this movie looks like it's specifically doing that. And also, this movie doesn't even look like it was made by Spike Lee. Like, specifically, the camera angles. Some of them look like they were shot on iPhones, for that matter. And there's handheld camera work everywhere. Just, none of this is working me really, and it pains me to say that too, because from the Spike Lee joints that I have seen in my life, I have really enjoyed them. For instance, Do the Right Thing is in my top 30 favorite movies of all time. I love that movie so much, as I remember you saying once, it's one of the most culturally significant movies ever made, and I highly agree with that. It's a great movie nonetheless. This movie, though, I did not get a Spike Lee vibe from it one bit. It just looks like a completely half-assed return to form that it really just needs a bunch of re-edits to actually look good in the slightest. And I'm gonna see this still. I don't know if I can see it with an open mind because of the way it's setting up to be. But what did you think of this?
Well, I don't really have a problem with films that are circled around religion. That's not the problem at all. What I do have a bit of an issue with is a film that's totally pro-religion, and the entire art is heavily it's preaching religion and saying that this is going to be the ultimate solution to everyone's problem in the film, and that's what this film seems like it's going to do. And it seems like it'll take away from a lot of the narrative and emotion that that Spike Lee is kind of known for. Do the Right Thing, as we both have a mutual love for that movie. And it seems like on paper, Red Hook Summer would be a total return to form. This would be yet another true Spike Lee joint. And especially since his disappointing output of films, and for me in the last decade, not a big fan of Miracle at St. Anna, not the biggest fan of Inside Man either. But yeah, as you said, this doesn't really look like a Spike Lee film. A lot of the shots, the way they're composed, they seem very amateurish. And I'm going to watch this only because it's Spike Lee, he's back in Brooklyn. But I'm not too jazzed about this trailer or the essence and the message this film is trying to send. And this is only through the trailer, so things could only probably get worse from here. But it's Spike Lee. I still have parts of my hopes up.
Yeah, and also we can at least give him thanks for the fact that he's taken a break from attending all those Knicks games and getting back to making movies now, too.
Woo!
Yes, and by the way, Knicks, if any of you are listening to this and you're a Knicks fan, Carmelo Anthony is a better wax figure impersonator than a team player. Just putting that out. Sorry if I pissed off any of you, but it's a fact in my eyes. But moving on to the core centerpiece of this episode, which is Rate the Release, in which in this last weekend we had 2 movies released, which also performed great at the box office, might I add, in which that is Seth MacFarlane's Ted and Steven Soderbergh's Magic Mike. We're going to start with Ted first, and Kevin, I'm going to let you lead this off. But what did you think of Ted?
Well, Ted, I guess I'll explain the plot quickly. It's a really simple plot. It's a 35-year-old guy. He wished for his teddy bear to be alive when he was 8, and the shooting star came by, and now the teddy bear is alive, and 27 years later, they're living together in his apartment, and they're toting it up, they're drinking, and they're kind of pissing off the 35-year-old, John, who's played by Mark Wahlberg's girlfriend, who kind of wants John to just grow up. So basically this movie is kind of a bromance movie between John and his teddy bear Ted, who's voiced by Seth MacFarlane. This is Seth MacFarlane's first live-action foray into cinema, and I think as a whole, it works. I think Ted is a really funny movie. It's a really satisfying, complete package of a film, and I think what really works about it is that although I think fans of Family Guy will really enjoy this, I think this film's sense of humor is very different from Family Guy's. Because what Family Guy usually does is that most of the jokes it tries to make are really not funny. The humor in most of Family Guy's, like random flashbacks and really weird references, the humor in that is that they just made that joke. They interrupted the entire plot to make that joke. The joke is that they just made that joke, if that makes any sense. With Ted, I think the interesting thing with this film is that it's actually making jokes, and they're really, really funny. Everything that comes out of Ted's mouth is amazing. He's absolutely the scene stealer of this film, and I have to give a major kudos to every actor who interacts with Ted, because they basically have to deal with complete dead space, because Ted is a computer-generated character who looks great, by the way. It looks really amazing. And I think this film as a whole, as long as you're not easily offended by, racist humor or really disgustingly sexual humor, I think you'll find a really nice time in Ted. It's a simple movie that'll give you exactly what you want.
Yes, and I agree with a lot of those points you did make. I really had a blast with this movie as well, and it surprised me to say the least as well, because granted, I'm not the biggest fan of MacFarlane's work. I really like the early seasons of Family Guy a lot. I don't watch American Dad too much. I hardly ever watch The Cleveland Show, yet I really liked his transition to feature filmmaking for a debut movie, and specifically for the fact that the one goal that he had with this film was to make people laugh. He certainly set the bar high, and it ended up achieving well for me and many other people who saw this movie. I have a lot of friends that loved it as well. The humor works so well in this movie. The pop culture references are being zinged left and right, and both in the delivery of the writing and the actors, they both compensate very well for when you hear the joke on screen. And even just for the sight gags as well, there are a few cutaway gags here and there that you'd see in a Family Guy episode, but there really aren't that many compared to the amount that you'd see in an episode, though, which I really liked how that was toned down, in which essentially this movie sets up its own form of humor. And I really liked a lot of it for the fact that it had a balance between the pop culture references, the cutaway gags, and even just the physical comedy in particular. The acting is great. I thought Mark Wahlberg and Mila Kunis had very good chemistry with each other, and they both had good comedic line delivery as well, but as usual, Seth MacFarlane stole the show doing the voice of Ted, but he also did the motion capture body work of every time that you see Ted move on screen. That was MacFarlane doing the actual movement with the motion capture uniform that he was wearing while on set with the actors, and you have to give more praise to the actors too, because they had to do all their lines and actions on screen with an inanimate object that's not even present on screen at the time. It's only Seth MacFarlane's voice that they hear in order to play off of that. And essentially that all adds on kind of this whole improv technique to their acting, in which they basically have to play out to their own capabilities with this factor alone. And as for direction, though, Seth MacFarlane, of course, he'll have time to expand on it, but for a debut, he sets it right by timing up the jokes very well, even though there are a few that fall flat. The supporting cast is a bit underused, and some of the roles are a bit forced at times just to create filler for the plot. Specifically, I'm talking about Joel McHale and Giovanni Ribisi's characters. Both really good actors, and they do good with the stuff that they're given, but of course they could have had characters that could have represented a larger role to the plot than the forced capabilities that they have to set forth with for the film. But nonetheless, I don't want to ramble on too much about the flaws, and one more I would want to put out, the third act is inconsistent compared to the first two. While you still laugh here and there, it really gets more into the fact that MacFarlane knows that he has to end this movie at some point, and all this stuff is kind of filler to just cut to the end credits and show more of the last tidbits of humor. But nonetheless, though, I had a very fun time with Ted. I laughed a lot, and it's probably my favorite comedy of the year so far, and overall, I'll give it 4 out of 5 stars.
Yeah, I would give it 4 out of 5 stars as well, although I think a lot of complaints are coming from the third act being really inconsistent. I'd say that the movie as a whole is kind of inconsistent. There's more than a few stretches of the film in which it really isn't trying to make a joke, and it's trying to develop the relationship between Mark Wahlberg and Mila Kunis, and it feels kind of really out of place because it switches from this raunchy comedy angle, and it goes straight into this completely sincere romantic comedy angle, and it kind of comes out of left field, and it doesn't really work that well. I mean, Wahlberg and Kunis have surprising chemistry with one another, and they seem like a very realistic couple. But it's a very uneven balance between the two. I think Seth MacFarlane, you can tell that this is his first film because a lot of scenes go on for far longer than they have to. A lot of scenes just linger, and it feels like they should have a quicker end. But MacFarlane, he milks a lot of these scenes, and a few of them he milks completely dry of any humor, and then it ends on kind of a lackluster joke. But, I'm still standing with it. As many flaws as there are in this film, and as much as you can pick at it, at the end, I was completely satisfied. I walked out of the theater, and I had a big smile on my face. I laughed a lot. My money was well spent.
Yes, I can't say my money was well spent, but I saw it at a screening, but I say that driving down to San Diego and waiting in line for hours, of course, the wait definitely paid off for sure with this film. I sure had a lot of fun with it, laughed a lot. That was my main goal in the first place, and ended up achieving that for sure. But now we move on to a much more radically different movie than Ted, Steven Soderbergh's Magic Mike, and I'm going to start off this one in which it's loosely based off of Channing Tatum's own experiences as a 19-year-old male stripper in Tampa, Florida before his acting career took off. And in the movie, he plays Michael Magic Mike Lane, who's a veteran stripper at this male strip club called Exquisite, which is owned by the scene-steal-worthy Matthew McConaughey. And during the period of one summer, he's a guy that's trying to get this furniture business up and running because he wants to leave his job at some point so he can pursue his own future ventures. And also at the same time, he recruits this young 19-year-old named Adam, who's later nicknamed as the Kid, who's played by Alex Pettyfer from I Am Number 4 Thor and Beastly. Granted, those movies aren't that good, but he does a much better job in this film. And he ends up taking him under this wing, and the movie itself is a behind-the-scenes look at the lifestyle of male strippers, both off and on the stage. And it's a very delicate balance between human drama and genuine comedy, to say the least. And Steven Soderbergh is definitely one of the best working directors today. And all the movies that I have seen, I've never been disappointed once with all the stuff that he does put up on screen. And yet again, this movie does show that he loves working with ensemble casts more than anything. But this movie is without doubt one of the biggest surprises of the summer so far, because a lot of people I know, we were all skeptical of this movie because it's very misleading in its marketing, because it really only shows off of several of the big dance sequences that happen in the movie with the male strippers. But the movie itself, it has a lot more grounded balance within the reality of the lifestyle itself. And the way that Soderbergh treated the subject was very sensitive and authentic, in which turn off your homophobic mind for at least this movie and just appreciate that these male stripper dance sequences are very entertaining, to say the least. I mean, they're all choreographed very well, and you can't help but laugh at the over-the-top aspects that they have within them as well. In terms of acting, Channing Tatum without a doubt delivers the best performance of his career, and definitely the best of this year too, because he has starred in 3 movies that I have seen this year: Haywire, 21 Jump Street, and now this, Magic Mike, in which he has consistently improved his acting movie by movie. In Haywire, his role was pretty small, but he played it very right. His line delivery was solid, and his chemistry was decent with the lead actors that he was working with. Then in 21 Jump Street, he surprised the hell out of me with his comedic chops, because he had such great romantic chemistry with Jonah Hill, and that really paid off for the movie itself as it went on all the way for its running time. And now in this movie, he's able to show his genuine human side in acting, because you really believe the character he's playing as an authentic person that you might meet sometime in your real life. And Alex Pettyfer, also in addition to Tatum, he delivers his best performance, in which it's very Eddie Adams, Mark Wahlberg-ish from Boogie Nights, because he's a young kid brought into this somewhat of a family, in which it's a family of male strippers, literally, and he goes through the ups and downs, the consequences, and the rise to fame, so much more that Mark Wahlberg's character in Boogie Nights went through. And the movie itself is very grounded within these similarities to Boogie Nights, but the occupation of male stripping itself is what sets it apart in several scenes, which show the differences. But this movie is without doubt one of the biggest surprises of the summer so far, and probably one of the best movies to release this summer too, because we've been stuck in a huge rut for the past month or so, in which there have been some really good movies, but then there have been a lot of ones that have been just meh, average, or really suck. But I am pleased to say that Magic Mike is one of the best movies of the summer so far. However, it does have a few flaws here and there. Specifically, it has some scene transitions that feel a little off, and also the acting is really good, just the supporting cast is heavily underused, specifically the other male strippers there are. You don't really get to know who they are. But nonetheless, this is a very, very solid film by director Steven Soderbergh, and it's one that surprised me a lot, because I had some skepticism going in for the fact that it would be too flamboyant or over the top with the essence of male stripping itself, but I love the behind-the-scenes lifestyle look that took into it, and I'm going to give it a very strong 4 out of 5 stars. Kevin, what did you think of Magic Mike?
Yeah, I was very surprised by this film. I was shocked that I liked it, and not because it's a male stripper film, but actually, yeah, because it was a male stripper film. It doesn't seem like this movie, especially with the marketing following it, it seemed like showgirls for women. It seemed like that was the big thing behind it. It seemed like a big dramatic reason to have Channing Tatum be his stripper self on camera. But the movie itself is actually quite good. I think it's a really interesting look at this business. I think every performance of this film, every actor delivers their best performance of their career. As we mentioned, Tatum, Pettyfer, Olivia Munn is actually really great in this for the amount of time she's in it. McConaughey has never been funnier. Maybe Dazed and Confused, who knows? But I'd say his performance in this is far funnier and better than anything he's ever done. This movie is actually very funny. It has a lot of genuine humor to it. It has some genuine heart to it at times. And I'll say it, the dance scenes are actually really fun. They're ridiculous, they're huge, they're loud, and it's accompanied by these crazy dance remixes and these cheers and cries of women in the audience. It's ridiculous, and it's not gonna make you instantly gay. All right, real talk. That's not gonna happen. It's men getting on stage, dancing really, really exotically to some big dance music, and they happen to be taking off their clothes and dry humping women. That's it. It's a whole different ballpark from female stripping, and that's actually one of the more interesting things of the film, is that it does show you that side of stripping, the different gender side. I think, though, this film has a few big problems. I think Soderbergh is quite fond of Boogie Nights, the Paul Thomas Anderson film, which deals with a young man's descent into the seedy underbelly of the 1970s porn industry. This film definitely tries to go for the same angle, right up to, it has a very distinct 3-act structure in which it goes June, July, August, and it's big black screen and white font, and it's very eerily similar to what Boogie Nights does. What Magic Mike's hugest flaw is, though, is that it's very much a character piece. But Soderbergh's style is usually one that's very emotionally distant. The viewer is only an observer, not a partaker in the plot. So with a character piece like Magic Mike, where you have it, the main enjoyment of the film kind of comes from connecting with the main characters. Having an emotionally distant film and style of telling the story really harms it in the end. Not too much, because this is still a movie that I'd certainly recommend, but when the characters are also just not that interesting. Magic Mike, for example, he wants to get out of stripping so he can, drumroll please, open a custom furniture shop. What? Yeah, but it's stuff like that. It's a lot of the characters in this movie are just so normal. And it's weird because a lot of people's criticisms about movies is that they're too unrealistic. But maybe Magic Mike is a bit too realistic. When your characters are overshadowed by, a 4-minute appearance of a pot-bellied pig, you have a problem. And the editing in this film is very odd. Whenever Cody Horn is on screen, who's one of the very few female characters of the film, I think Soderbergh really likes Cody Horn, because whenever someone else is talking, the camera is on her face for no reason. It's her doing nothing. She's looking blankly into the space, into oblivion, while someone else is delivering some sort of line. It's the weirdest editing choice I've seen in a while. And also, another flaw of the film that I think Boogie Nights does 20 times better is that Magic Mike tries to show the viewer the seedy underbelly of male stripping, which really only amounts to a throwaway plot development of one of the characters dealing drugs, but then it reaches a really simple, really quick conclusion and solution, so it does become throwaway in the end. But the big picture of Magic Mike is that it is surprisingly good. I enjoyed it quite a bit, and it's so far, I think, one of the better made mainstream movies of the year, because the cinematography is beautiful, everything about it technically is really impressive, but it has those key flaws that keep it back from being a really fantastic movie. But I think 4 stars for me would be too generous, but I think 3.5 is way too low, so I'm gonna go for a 3.8 out of 5 stars.
Going on the Mark Ellis Schmo system right there.
Yeah, there we go.
But one fun fact I do want to bring up before we end our Rate the Release segment is that Gabriel Iglesias is in this movie, and one of my friends, when I saw this with several friends, and one of them, he just turned to me when he first saw his character and went, "Is that Gabriel Iglesias?" And I just went, "Yeah, you know what? That is him." I never even thought of that because I didn't even really know that guy still worked in Hollywood's film set yet. His role is decent in the film. I just went, Gabriel Iglesias. Never saw that coming.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked when I saw that too, but I was incredibly relieved to learn that he wasn't a stripper.
As was I, because I don't know how much more of it I could have taken. Then I just feel like I'm watching an episode of Nick Cannon's Wild 'N Out, if that's the case then. But anyway, Magic Mike, we both really enjoyed it, as we did for Ted. Be sure to check both those movies out this weekend. They are both in a tight race for the box office. Ted was the winner. In fact, Ted has now set the record for the highest opening box office weekend for a non-sequel R-rated comedy, which is a very high feat right there. It ended up beating out The Hangover, which originally held that record. But nonetheless, be sure to check out those movies this weekend. And that unfortunately brings us to the end of this episode of Film Freaks. So, Kevin, where can we find you in the social network sphere?
You can find me on my YouTube channel where I review tons of movies. YouTube.com/kacman11. That's KACMAN11. You can also find me on Twitter where I tweet about life and every single movie I watch and entertainment news. It's fun. I'm Kevin Kacman, the name Kevin, and then Kacman, Kacman.
All right, and then you can follow me, Tyler from CaliCriticReviews, on Twitter, for instance. Start off at CaliCritic, at CaliCritic. And then you can, of course, find me on YouTube, youtube.com/CaliCriticReviews, just the way it sounds. You can also find me on Facebook, Tyler Christian, and then in parentheses, CaliCriticReviews, a capital for the C for Cali, C for Critic, and then R for Reviews. And then finally, you can also find me on my website where I'm finally starting to write reviews again. I wrote reviews for Ted and Magic Mike. Those are the first reviews I've written on my website in almost exactly 2 months. And that website is CaliCriticsCorner.blogspot.com. And that brings us to the end of this episode. I hope you had a lot of fun listening to it. Of course, all our news stories, trailers, and so forth, our links to find us are in the description below, so check those out if you want to. But in the meantime, I'm Tyler from CaliCriticReviews.
I'm Kevin from Kacman11.
And we will see you next time on the Film Freaks podcast. Goodbye.